Hello students, today is an interesting lesson where we hit a topic we cover in most chapters, basically what was daily life for Joe Schmo Roman. What did they do? What was family like? What were the women allowed to do? What did they do for fun? As we make today's trip through Roman life, think about the similarities and differences of the other civilizations and societies that we've already covered so far this year. Now, we may not have gladiatorial games, as we'll learn about today, but we still have a lot of competitive sports, like mixed martial arts is huge these days. Alright, let's get to it. So much like today, the vast empire of Rome had urban centers and agricultural areas. Roman cities were the cultural centers of Roman civilization. Among the most cultured of these cities, it was really centrally located in the cities found within the Italian peninsula, so like Rome and the cities nearby Rome. Let's go on to the city of Rome itself. So Rome itself was a huge planned city of over 1 million people. It had square street plans, 90-degree angles, not like Pittsburgh, which is a mess. The emperor lived in a large palace on top of a hill. At the bottom of this hill there was the Forum, which served as a public meeting spot, market, and central social gathering location. It kind of reminds me a lot of the Greek agoras. Surrounding the Forum were temples and other public buildings. The wealthy also lived on hills, the hills of Rome, in big walled-off houses called villas, which looked pretty sweet. They usually had an atrium or courtyard in the middle. It's a courtyard, atrium. A lot of them had these pools in them. Some of the wealthy people even had second homes, basically estates outside the city. Here's a cool picture of a villa. So the less rich folk were artisans and shopkeepers. However, most Romans were just poor people. They lived in cramped wooden buildings, often 6 or 7 stories tall. If they caught fire, it was basically the end of that. Garbage collected in the streets. Crime was bad at night. Being poor in Rome meant essentially miserable living conditions. Many of the poor folk performed unskilled labor or had no jobs at all. We talked about how slaves did a lot of the work, and it left a lot of poor Romans without work. To keep these masses, poor Romans, happy, the political leaders of Rome gave them what is called bread and circuses. Basically, they would offer free entertainment and throw bread at the crowds, kind of like the t-shirt cannon at the ball game. Imagine there was mass poverty in your town, but there were free baseball games and they had a bread cannon. That's kind of like what they did to keep the people distracted from their real problems. Lesson to be learned there, students. Don't let politicians feed you with their left hand while they take what you have from the right with their right. Among these free entertainment shows were chariot races at the Circus Maximus, or gladiatorial games at the Colosseum. A gladiator was essentially a fighter that fought to the death against other gladiators or even animals, for the entertainment of others. They were often slaves, prisoners, or even criminals, sometimes even just poor people. Good gladiators gained a lot of respect. Let's bump down to the Roman family. So, as is the norm for many civilizations we study, if not all, family was the center of Roman culture. The man was in charge, and in earlier Rome, families were large. As time passed, however, families got smaller and divorce actually became more commonplace. Husbands kept a close eye on their wives. Education was prevalent among the upper class for boys and girls, with individual education being the duty of the father, actually. Once older, a girl's education would stay at home, but a young man might go to a private school where he was taught more. The girls didn't get to go to private school. Now, boys became men at about the age of 15. Girls became women when they were married, which was regularly as young as 14. So boys usually married a little older than that, which tells me that they were marrying really young girls. I don't know if any of you are ready for marriage. I probably wasn't ready for marriage. I have 14. The role of women. Let's bump into that. Women of Rome were not the worst off of the societies we've studied. but their station did change depending on their economic status. They did not have the full rights, the rights of full citizenship, and men were in charge of the household and they could hold office and women couldn't. But women did have heavy influence on their husbands' decisions. The wives of emperors gained power over time. For example, Empress Juliana ran the empire while her husband, Emperor Septimus, was away fighting. Now, wealthy women in the 100s AD Rome could own land, sell land, and even run a business. They were in charge of the household, but the slaves did most of the work, leaving the women or the lady of the house free to study the arts or make art and read literature and go out to plays and go to the temple to pray and all kinds of things like that. The less well-off women were more likely to help their husband run the shop or the farm or anything like that. Basically, rich women could sit around, but the poor women had to work to help their husbands so that they could get by. Even among the poor women, however, some served as priestesses, hairdressers, or even doctors. Sounds pretty awesome. Alright, let's cut to slavery, and then we're going to call it a day. Slavery had been a part of Rome since the beginning. Slaves did a variety of tasks. Some worked in the households of wealthy Romans. Some worked in the fields. Some worked in mines. And some were forced to do public work projects like building the aqueducts or road systems. They really did it all. Many Greek slaves were actually very well educated, as we know, and served as artisans and even teachers. As the empire expanded, there were more and more slaves. By 100 BC, 40% of the population of the Italian peninsula was slaves, which seems like a whole lot. Regardless of what they did, slave life was generally miserable. No one likes being a slave, and with so many slaves, Rome had to deal with slave uprisings. For example, in 73 BC, a gladiator named Spartacus led a slave rebellion. His followers reached a number of 70,000. They sought to reach the Alps and escape to their homelands. However, the rebellion was eventually crushed by the Roman army, and thousands of the rebels were actually crucified. It's pretty brutal. So this is a really long lesson. There's still a lot more to go. So I broke it down. We're going to do part 2 tomorrow. For today, simple forum post discussion, we call it in Canvas. So for today's assignment, we're keeping it simple. Please answer the following question with complete sentences. Please check your spelling and grammar. What of what we learned today surprised you most about Roman life, and why? Real simple. And I posted first. I have an example here you can take a look at if you need to. That's it for today. We pick up Roman life. Part 2 tomorrow. Alright, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.